Hello everyone, this is William with CommanderCast.com, and I'm here to introduce a brand new project that I'm working on. It's called the Alpha Build Series. This is something I've been wanting to do for the past couple of years, I want to say. It's an idea that I've always had. You hear about people like Brian David Marshall, Magic personalities, and maybe you know people like this, where they have just one commander deck. They have one commander that they really love, and they build this deck for it, and the deck that literally does everything they want to do. Like with Brian David Marshall, it was the Momor Vig deck, where it searches, and it draws, and it plays fun creatures, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it gets to the point where you're refining the deck so much that it just becomes a very, very tuned engine, and you know for sure, yes, this is the deck that I like to play with this commander. And I always thought that was a really cool thing. Now, what you see here is I have 20... No, see, I want to say... Yeah, I'm missing 4 of them. So yeah, I have 23 of my 27 commanders here. The only ones I'm missing are Gulkar Gissa, Sigarda Host of Herons, Kozilek, the Great Distortion, and Sliver Hive Lord. But I've got the rest of my commanders up here. And I have all these decks built in real life. I actually just got these cards on Moto last week. And a lot... So you'll see that, I have a lot of decks, which is great for when you get tired of one deck, you go ahead and you switch over to another deck. And then when you feel like playing a certain kind of style, you just go back to that deck again. If I want to play big, giant, rampy sea monsters, I can go right back to Prime Speaker Zagana player until either the meta starts shifting or I feel like I want to play something else. Then I can go over to like Morath Tokens or Tarka Dragons or Elf Ball with Freyalise or Goblins with Ib. Rexiel wants to play with your stuff, just all that kinds of things. And even just completely different styles. Like Aurelia the War Leader, which I built to be a very aggressive deck, is a lot different than, say, the Noyandar Durley deck, which is just sit back with open mana and interact with people on their turns. So, I don't get to play Commander as often as I used to. And so that, of course, puts kind of a strain on which decks do I want to play. Well, I really need to develop the Daxos deck more so I can figure out if Daxos is the commander that I want. Oh, but I also haven't played Avacyn forever, so I should be playing her. And it really puts a strain on just how much refinement can go into my decks. And I'm someone that likes the refinement process. I actually really quite enjoy it. There's a certain novelty to taking something that's brand new, like the Freyalise Commander deck, and go ahead and playing it over and over again, figuring out what you do like, what you don't like, and then making your personal tweaks from there. Even if you get a list online and you go, okay, I'm going to use this as my base, and you go from there, you say, okay, I have these cards, but I don't have those cards, I can't get those cards, what are the substitutes that I can get, and stuff like that. There's a lot about the iteration process that really appeals to me. But I don't really get that because I have so many commander decks, unless I play it just like non-stop. Like I was playing the Atarka deck for a couple of months, and I got the Atarka deck to where I wanted it, and then with that, I needed to go on and play some Daxos or Noyandar, because those ones were coming out now. The original commander decks, Freyalise. These are decks that I really, really love, but sometimes they get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm happy with the deck now. It's time to make sure the other decks are up to snuff. I was playing Gahiji for a while until I decided that Morath is actually Morath just does exactly what I want. Like, Morath's a good boy. And I was playing, it just completely ignored the fact that my teamer commander was Yasova, who had actually switched from Maelstrom Wanderer so that I could, play something akin to a more fair deck. But once I actually got a hankering to play some teamer, which my deck was more or less just a straight value deck, it was just, okay, I want to play creatures, I want to play them for value, and I want to swing for big. Once I started playing it again, it was like, oh wait, I actually don't like Yasova as much as Maelstrom Wanderer. I guess I needed to play some more games with her and just see more of those situations with her to figure out if she was for me or not. And so I swapped back to Maelstrom Wanderer, and I was immediately happy with how well that deck performed. One of my most touted decks is Kaalia, and she's pretty well tuned to my liking by virtue of having had her the longest. She's actually just my oldest EDH deck ever. And there are still times where I think, okay, there are still things about this deck that I want to upgrade and want to tune, because Magic has changed so much from when I stopped playing her regularly. And some of this comes from the fact that, a lot of my wedge commanders are just really powerful decks and really powerful commanders. And so I don't bring them out as often because, when they win, they tend to win in ways that, make people unhappy, or it's just, I always feel like I'll have a target on my back if I play them too often. Like, that goes without saying with Kaalia. But the Master of Wonder starts, making people sick because sometimes it could just win out of nowhere. My Damia deck is kind of a dick deck, where I'm playing like a lot of the villains of Magic. Like I'm playing the Praetor cycle. I was playing the Eldrazi Titans in there too back before I had enough lands to start the Colorless Edition project. Narset can be. I don't play the Time Warp and Enter the Infinite Omniscience super combo Narset that just storms out infinite turns and all that. But I do play her I do use her to get a lot of really cool, really powerful, expensive equipment out for free, and she does become just a stupid powerful Voltron because I have a Sunforger control package in there. Sometimes she can just shut people down, especially when it gets down to one-on-one and the rest of the group is to take it out. Kildor likes to ghost bag stuff, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you also get cards like Nexstar, which nobody likes. And honestly, I built Nexstar to be the Dick Puncher, so you get that. So, what I'm going to head and do with this From Alpha build series is I'm going to use it to kind of increase the amount of commander games that I'm playing, but I'm also using it to refine my commanders. So how am I going to be doing that? Refining each of these commanders is going to be the primary goal. But how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of our commanders. The first one will actually be Avacyn, Guardian Angel. And we're going to build a deck for each commander, starting all the way with the original set, Alpha. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Are there enough cards in there? Technically, there are, because there are basic lands. You do lose some amount of cards when you go from paper to digital, because some of those cards never made it to digital. When I was drafting up the original list for the Alpha list for Avacyn, I found some really cool stuff that I wanted to go ahead and... But actually, I can pull one of those up right now. Let me go ahead and Alt-tab over to MagicCards.info. Helm of Chatzuk is one that never made it to Moto. It's just a one-cost artifact that says, pay 1 tap, target creature gains banning until end of turn. I was really excited to play this when I saw that. I was like, okay, we're going from Alpha, we're going to go balls to the wall, slam banning on the table. Let's do this. But then I got to Moto, and it just didn't exist there. And that's true for a lot of the, the color wards too. Like Black Ward, Red Ward. A lot of stuff that was going to really help this deck and help Avacyn become kind of a Voltron commander until I could get more support for her. It just doesn't exist. Holy Armor, Lance. So, missing some toys. You do end up just filling it with basic lands. I believe the deck is running 44, which you'll see when I actually start putting up the videos themselves. I'll start with a deck tech, giving the changes, the new stuff that comes out with this new set. And basically, it's going to be, here's the deck, here's our progress so far. And we're going to keep adding on sets by sets. So after the Alpha Revised run, the next one goes into Arabian Nights, then Antiquities, and so on and so forth. And we're just going to keep going chronologically. And by doing that, it's going to help us refine the commander. And eventually, it might even help me realize that I don't necessarily want to play with this commander. A lot of what the early games are going to do is they're going to show me just how powerful the commander is on their own, and whether I want that or not. Someone like Kaalia is going to be absolutely miserable for the first Alpha run, because there's like Dragon Whelp, Sarah Angel, Horde of Demons, Lord of the Pit, and Shivan Dragon. That's really it. She's only got 5 targets from the original Alpha build. I'd like to have somewhere between 22 to 25. So she'll be a while. But it also gives us the ability to go into number 2. The goal number 2 here is to grow my Moto collection. I actually just started a new job. It pays the bills, but it doesn't leave me a lot to actually do in my spare time. That's where you guys come in. This is going to be funded almost exclusively through the Patreon. So the more money that I can pull from our Patreon account, which you can donate to, it's the Patreon / the CommanderCast Network. You can sign up, become a monthly donor. I'm going to be putting these videos up early for, at the very least, I want to say $5 tier owners. So you'll be able to get these videos early. You'll be able to get the progress early. I'm not sure exactly the rate at which I'll be posting. The goal is to go ahead and post an update every 2 weeks, let's say. That's going to be our goal. It's going to be the goal is to make it a twice a month updated series. So we'll go ahead and see that. It'll also be just a much more reasonable acquisition rate if I'm going set by set and going, okay, what are all the white cards that I want for Avacyn to go into this pile? And then we'll go ahead and we'll do it in Wooburg order. So we'll be Azami, and then I'll get Gissa, and then Ib, and Freyalise. And so we'll go ahead and build the collection up. Then when we go ahead and go on to the Ally color commanders, then we can start looking at the gold cards. And then we go with the tricolor, and the decks will become easier to build from Alpha by virtue of just being able to combine colors. Really, it's going to be the monocolor decks that are going to be hardest to build in their original Alpha run. So we're going to end up relying on these a lot more. I feel like, maybe with the exception of Avacyn, that my monocolor commanders will be a lot easier to stand on their own. Gissa just needs to recycle creatures. Azami's already drawing cards. And Freyalise is Freyalise. I know some people aren't impressed by her, but I really like her, so that's all that really matters. Sorry. The third... So we have refine the commanders by going set by set. Grow the Moto collection at an affordable rate. Because, and aside from that, there are just a lot of really expensive cards in paper that you get to play for dirt cheap on Moto. So I'm really excited about that. Our third and final goal here is to discover the hidden gems that kind of just get lost to the edges. The Helmet Chotsnik, I actually might just get that in paper because banding is actually an incredibly powerful mechanic. It's an artifact, so it can go into any deck. Once you get past, the old what the heck is banding discussion, some of these cards are actually just really cool. I know a couple of these I actually discovered because I started looking at cards from Alpha for the series. And I'm really hoping to have that experience throughout a lot of these sets. If it's on Moto, you're going to find it in paper. And sometimes if you can get them in paper, you have those awesome moments where you play a card and your opponent has to go, wait, what is that? I actually have a friend who says that he checks my board every now and then, just for tech cards. Like, I'm actually the guy that he leeches off of, just for tech. He's like, oh, that's actually a really cool interaction. That's a really cool card. And so we're going to try and recreate some of those scenarios just by virtue of playing games with older cards. And as a side effect, it actually will help me appreciate a lot of the newer stuff that we get. We get people who complain about how, like, Thragtusk and Siege Rhino and a lot of creatures these days are just really overpowered in Standard. It wasn't like that originally. Originally, you had a lot of really bad spells, a lot of bad enchantments. Artifacts weren't even a thing in equipment weren't really a thing in Alpha, not until like Mirrodin. So we've got a long way of going through Magic history, and it will really help show kind of how the colors evolve, how card design evolves, and it'll just be our little fun trip through time. So we'll be doing that for all 27 of my commanders. Like I said, I only have 23 right now, which, sorry. We'll go ahead and run through those so that you know what to expect. So, like I said, first off, we'll go with Avacyn Guardian Angel. At this point in time, I've already done a test recording of her, and I can tell you that I'm hedging on the fence right now. I'm actually really attracted to the new Linvala that come into play, the one that's actually kind of timely reinforcements built into her. But Avacyn still has some really interesting play, which I'll go ahead and go into detail about why I like each of these commanders in their own respective videos. After Avacyn, we will be going into Azami, Lady of Scrolls, which is a very popular wizard tribal set we'll definitely get to see a lot of the wizards through the ages, just to kind of maximize her. Right now, my Azami deck is actually more of a morph control deck, where all the morphs are in fact wizards. Unfortunately, they can't all be Willowbenders, but they can be damn near close. I'm missing Gulkar Gissa. Gissa I like quite a bit. I like zombie tokens, and I've got her in a reanimation shell. It'll be interesting to see just how close to the current paper versions I have that these online decks become, just because the scope of my collection will be so much grander. It's also really helpful that you only need one copy of a card on Moto to use across all your collections. Ib Havard, Ib Nation, stand the hell up. Really looking forward to getting this guy back to its roots. I've been feeling like my paper version was getting a little herp-de-derby, looking to try and get this guy back to his super aggro combo roots. He's a flagship for the website, flagship for the blog, flagship for the show, and I absolutely just love this guy. He's really all in, and we're going to have mountains out the wazoo. Ferry Elise is one of those commanders that, if you listen to our show, then you know that I'm actually the only person who really likes her. Like, the other ones like her, okay, but they just find her incredibly boring. I don't think of her as boring so much as I just think she's really solid. She definitely has a lot less power than the other commanders that we have here. But I do like that she's kind of a slower elf ball. And my deck is less elf ball so much as it's just more ramp. She puts out dudes that ramp. And if the ramp isn't there, then we elf ball. Noyandar is one of the more recent commanders. Actually, the one I wasn't expecting to like as much from Battle for Zendikar. As I alluded to earlier, he's definitely more. I definitely like playing him as more of a tempo control type deck, where I leave everything untapped, and I'm trying to keep everything at instant speed. The one I have only plays two other creatures, which is Talrand and Monastery Mentor. So we'll definitely get to see the highlight of a lot of instants and sorceries through Magic's ages. It'll be a lot better for him in his alpha run than I suspect most of these other characters, because these spells were so much better than creatures. Rexiel represents another aspect for why I would love to do the alpha build series. I have a commander that I really like. Rexiel is another one of our flagship commanders. He was originally part of Andy's $30 challenge way back when he started back, I want to say 2011, 2010, maybe even 2009. I have this commander. I have this deck. I like the commander. I just don't necessarily know what I want to do with the deck. The one version I have has a lot of, I want to play with your type effects like Praetor's Grasp. But I don't know. It's been something I've been feeling with a long time for, and I haven't reached a conclusion yet. Right now, we are going to with Rexiel, I feel like it's going to be, we have the commander, and we don't necessarily know what we want to do with him. So we'll go ahead, we'll go through our alpha run, and it will be something that we discover as we play him. We'll figure out where the fun is there. Then we'll have Olivia Valdarin. This one is actually incredibly infamous for having caused a 3-hour game with no end in sight. Kind of the inspiration for this is a control-based type deck that wants everyone to play completely hellbent, which is to say, with no cards in hand. It's very much a death by 1,000 cuts. It played stuff like Wheel of Torture for a lot of really penny type stuff. It was actually very good at getting rid of Planeswalkers because you could redirect all the incidental damage to to the Planeswalkers instead. So I'm really looking forward to coming back to her. She's not one I play too often in paper because she's more of a, I want to play a hate everyone control style deck, destroy all the non-basics, Blood Moon type stuff. Atarka is very interesting. You see her Dragon Lord version over here, and that's because I still go back and forth about which version I like playing the most. But it's still Atarka, so I just have them both listed as the commander. And we'll go ahead and have them both. It's a little bit of a cheat, because I'll probably have her and her Dragon Lord version in the deck. But I don't know. Like, they both do different things, so I kind of swap them out depending on what I want to do. Atarka World Render she just eats people out of nowhere. You can go ahead, end a turn, flash in, dictate the Twin Gods, have a haste enabler, play her, and then boom, someone is just dead if they don't have removal. And Dragon Lord Atarka is a lot better at keeping up and catching up on board presence and wiping out something big when she enters play, and then just being a really big beat stick. Definitely not as fast as her younger version can be, and part of the her from Alpha build is going to be figuring out which version we like playing better. I have a feeling it's going to be World Render because she does have that one hit out of nowhere potential, but a lot of those enablers came by a lot later in Magic's history. I want to say Theros blocking up. Part of that's because of Xenagos, dictated the Twin Gods, but the haste enabler is definitely going to be there. Sigarda is currently MIA. She is actually a decent price tag on Moto. I want to say about 17 tickets. And she's very much an Enchantress Voltron build. If you were watching the rotisserie draft last year, then you saw what's essentially the build that I run in paper with some changes, give and takes, just from the nature of a rotisserie draft format. The green white deck used to be Tristani, but it's one of those things that I was talking about earlier where I don't play a deck for a while because it's plateaued and I feel like I've done everything. I've gotten to the point where I want to and I want to focus on other decks. Then I go back and play a deck and realize that there are problems that I hadn't really experienced before because Magic evolved and I wasn't playing the deck enough to keep up with it. So Tristani ended up getting scrapped. She got absorbed by Marath, and Sigarda ended up taking over as the green-white slot. We'll get here when we get to that alpha build, though. Daxos the Return is currently holding the spot for the white-black one. I might end up switching this to Ollie, depending on what my real-life play reflects. So I do like the token aspect. I like kind of a reanimation thing. Black-white is actually just one of the hardest decks for me to come up with conceptually. The Daxos deck doesn't interest me as much because it's more or less a black version of the Sigarda deck. Niv Mizzet Drake of Genius was actually my first attempt at a true combo deck. And combo off it does is I call it Storm without Storm because it relies on Eye of the Storm. And that's something that we don't get until the original Ravnica City of Guilds block. So it'll be interesting to see just how many ways we can figure out the combo off, because that is going to be the goal with Niv Mizzet, is that we want to combo off. Niv Mizzet is in there because he's a draw engine. He's a great way. He can actually be a decent sized blocker, decent attacker, and he's just kind of a way to pour access mana and draw cards. He also goes infinite with Turnabout and Nivix Guildmage. So I don't normally like auto-win buttons, but sometimes you just kind of need it for a combo deck like that. Pharika, God of Affliction, is another one of my favorites. I call her Devotion to Multiplayer in paper because sometimes we get into these crazy 5 to 6 player games, and she lets me, just kind of interact with other people's turns. The ability to donate snakes, to mess with blockers, and to kind of leech off of everyone. That was part of her deck design, was to scale with the number of people in play. So it'll be interesting to see how that works with Moto, and to see what happens when we go into those really big games. Aurelia the Warrior Leader, like I said earlier, was built to be very fast and very aggressive. I don't feel like in paper she is fast or aggressive enough, and that might be because I'm missing a lot of key 1 and 2 drops from her that most people would say, yeah, when you're playing a white deck, you kind of you want to play aggressive, you have to have like these 5 to 6 white drops, like with a Wayfarer, etc., etc. Prime Speaker Zagana, this was more of a case of this. She actually came about because I had the idea for a deck, and she just ended up being the commander that fit it best. I wanted to play a Kiora themed deck, where it's ramp, 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 play giant sea monsters, and then Prime Speaker Zagana just helps refill your hand. She actually ended up drawing a ridiculous amount of cards for me. So I'm not necessarily attached to the commander here per se, so much as what she does for the deck, and she's actually very unique in that regard, because a lot of these commanders, I start with the commander themselves, because they do something cool, or I like their aesthetic, and Zagana just completely breaks that mold for us. Going over here, Derevi Imperial Tactician actually holds up quite a bit of... She's not a stranger to having to carry the entire deck by herself. The Commander 2013 deck was actually just awful in terms of construction. And it was either, okay, you either had your commander or any of her other lordling buddies. Part of the reason why this reminded me of her deck ended up becoming a Fire Emblem themed deck, for me anyway, was because I kept thinking of her, Rubinia, and Rune as kind of like the lords of a Fire Emblem campaign, and like they had some other individual other characters too. There's Azami was in this deck, Lugian the Scholar was in here, so you were pretty much riding the backs of your legendary creatures in this deck to take it to victory. And now she's got to go through it all alone, but she's definitely no stranger to it. Being our first 3-color commander will make it a lot easier, because at this point we'll have all the staples that make up her shard from all of the 2-color decks and the monocolor decks. So the 3-color decks will actually just be the easiest, unless you're Kalia. Sidri, she's actually been one of my newer deck ideas. I was actually building her to be more and more combo, but also kind of a Rube Goldberg. Maybe that's not the right word, but basically, I wanted to try and create a combo machine that required so many pieces that it was kind of this really convoluted contraption. A lot of those combos come off of Intruder Alarm, and I ended up cutting a lot of the creatures from it because it just made the combo way too easy. I wanted Sidri or Karn to really be involved here. So we'll see what kind of... So Sidri will be the first commander that really gives us an idea of just how powerful the artifacts become. And Mirrodin's going to be a really big bolster to her. Next on the Mind Razor, like I said, he was built to be a dick puncher. The idea is that Possibility Storm makes this deck much more enjoyable to everyone else, but I still get to play all the fun. Everyone wheel their hand, discard their hand. I would be lying if I said part of the thing that I wanted to do with this deck is to make people hate Possibility Storm. Obviously, we don't get Possibility Storm until Dragon's Maze, which is actually a fairly recent card in terms of Magic history. So, it'll probably end up being a Grixis control deck, I want to say, which is very interesting to think about. When you think about control decks, you want to deny resources. But Nexus just hands out resources like candy. So, it also leads us into an interesting idea that with Moto, you get to play chaos effects a lot more readily, because Moto takes care of everything. Thieves Auction, Warp World, those type of crazy ass effects. It's just a lot easier to resolve when the computer's crunching the numbers. Karthus is going to be another one of our tribal ones. He'll have all the dragon support that Atarka builds up just from virtue of being a dragon tribal type deck. But Karthus wants to be a lot faster. Karthus also has a lot of reanimation potential. I try and differentiate Karthus and Atarka by saying, okay, Atarka's the big stompy dragon, dinosaur type dragons, and Karthus is a lot more leaning towards the Kolaghan type dragons, where they want to be fast, they want to hit hard. It's basically a dragon cannon. Marath is your example of token deck. I built mine in paper to be a Soul Sisters type build, so I actually have all of the Soul Sisters, and it gains a lot of life, a surprising amount of life. Because it's red-green, we can also include Omnath in there once we get to the Battle for Zendikar installment, but that's so late in what's going to be the Alpha build series that I don't know how much that's going to be relevant. But Marath, honestly, you could actually play Marath just with 99 lands and have this be a fairly decent deck. It's not unlike the Ashland the Pilgrim and 99 lands deck, which Calvin swears by, and I quite enjoy. Karador the Ghost Chieftain. You know him, you love him. He's one of the oldest original Commander product type things. Came out in the 2011 series, which 3 of my commanders are actually from that cycle. Karador, I love Karador. He's very much an attrition-based deck. I actually started building him with a Titania sub-package, with the sacrificing lands and the dredging. Very nicely put together. So we'll get to see a lot more of the reanimation type effects here. Narset and Lightmaster, like I said earlier, a Voltron-style deck is what I have built this into be, because a lot of the equipment I like the Cauldron Cycle, are just incredibly expensive. And Narset doesn't necessarily like playing with creatures. So just playing a lot of creatures, getting the Sunforger and Ravnica will be so huge. Sunforger is one of my favorite cards. and it'll enable so many shenanigans with her. Damia originally was built because I wanted to play Omniscience, the Omniscience. And being able to say, okay, drop your hand, refill, drop your hand, refill, drop your hand, is so much fun. And you fill it up with so many just haymaker type stuff. You know, like your Kozilek, like your Ulamog, like your Garruk, Primal Hunter, I want to say, where you neg him and you just draw 10, 12 more cards that you just play immediately. So a lot of basic land ramp, and you know, it just does everything I love doing with big rampy decks, you know, like Prime Speaker Zagana, which is empty your hand to ramp out as hard as you can, then refill with threats. There's really nothing I need to say about Kaalia. Fast, aggressive, 3 iconic tribes, and she will, you know, most of these 3-color commanders are going to be a lot easier with the From Alpha build, just by virtue of having access to 3 colors, and most of the stables having been acquired. Kaalia will still just be miserable, because there's only 5 targets in Alpha, and we don't get more targets for quite a while. In fact, as far as commanders go, she's actually worse than, say, Avacyn or Freyalise on her ability to stand alone, which is a thing that you can see with, like, most of my commanders, is that they do something on their own. Whether it's just be a body or get attacks. I've actually one-shotted people with Aurelia after doing nothing else but sitting on my board before. Maelstrom Wanderer is easily the most powerful commander ever printed. You know, 2 free spells, give all your stuff haste. The 8 mana is actually a feature, not a bug. And then, once we get over there, I don't know how we're going to do it necessarily with Sliver Hive Lord. I haven't decided if I'm going to start with Tempest when the Slivers were, you know, first introduced, so that we can go ahead and figure out which were the best Slivers of all time. Or, if I do just stick to my guns and say, okay, from Alpha, one more time, let's go ahead and do true 5-color. I feel like it's going to be more of the former. Because the point of having Sliver Hive Lord is that you want to build a Sliver deck. And at that point, I'm sure I'm going to be tired of the whole From Alpha series. So, we'll probably just go hop by hop, have Sliver Hive Lord, and every time they introduce new Slivers, we'll go ahead and try new Slivers. We can definitely maybe stop by like a Lara block or Invasion block to see more of the 5-color shenanigans that get played, which actually isn't a bad idea in terms of exploring the history of 5-color. Kozilek may not be my colorless commander at that point, but he's definitely the one I have now. Wastes weren't in Alpha, but in order to make this work, we kind of need basic lands. So at that point, I will be starting the deck with Wastes as the basic land of principal choice, and we're going to go from there. It's going to be Phil, and you know, there really aren't enough cards for a pure colorless deck, I want to say, until Antiquities. So again, that's another one that I might end up just having to cheat on. I'm really hoping that I figure out a definitive colorless commander by then, because because right now the Kozilek deck I have is Tribal Eldrazi. It's kind of a Herp-to-Dur, play really big Eldrazi's and then do stuff. I don't know, Sliver Hive Lord and Kozilek, the entire point of those is to play those tribal decks, and those tribes don't exist for the majority of Magic's history. So those will probably be special bonus episodes where I go ahead and go, okay guys, we're going to pick out these tribes and then we're going to figure out their support as we go. Something like that. But that's a problem for then. And that's basically the outline. It's going to be a lot of rinse and repeat in terms of formula, but they're going to be different each time because we're going to have different models and different goals for each of these decks. For now, it's time to go ahead and go to Alpha, and we're going to kick things off with Avacyn Guardian Angel, starting with our very first the Alpha build series. This has been William with CommanderCast.com. Thanks for watching.